Welcome into Foxborough Rush. If you love this show, make sure you check out Hold My Banner, available on Nesson as well. Of course, we are breaking down this historic sale of the Boston Celtics. Check us out. Hold My Banner is available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else you get your podcast. What a rush. Travis Thomas here on Foxborough Rush with my main man, Sean McGuire of Nesson.com. How you doing, Smeezy?
I'm fantastic, Travis. I know we're working today. Not a lot of other people are with the NCAA tournament games on, but
Yes.
that's just what we do here.
Yeah, well, listen, bro. NCAA tournament is child's play compared to what happened with the Celtics. $6.1 billion. That's a lot of cabbage for the C's. Let me ask you this. What do you think the Patriots right now today would sell for? Would it? I mean, are we talking $7 billion, you think?
I would say so, yeah. I think there was something in Forbes not that long ago. It was in the fall, September, October or something, and it had the Patriots right around 7. I think the Cowboys, no surprise, were number 1 at 10. But the Patriots were like 2 or 3. They were up there.
Man, that's a lot of money in the sports game, man. I mean, I got to tell you. And in times like this, Esmeezy, I look at my life and I wonder, where did I go wrong? I just don't I don't know. Where did I go wrong, man? I'm struggling to pay parking tickets here. All right, so Esmizzle, what a week that was for the Patriots. So we went back, producer Ethan and I, our esteemed producer, we go back and we're looking at the last 7 days we counted out. Let's start here. This was last Thursday when this happened. David Andrews gets released. And I know I didn't talk to you specifically about this, but I have to imagine you felt the same way I did, and a lot of fans did, Sean, of shock. Like, what? Yeah. I mean, first of all, your offensive line isn't any damn good. So you have no business getting rid of anyone as far as I'm concerned. But were you shocked? I mean, obviously a fan favorite there as well in David Andrews. Were you shocked by that news?
Yeah, I think I was. And I did think more than anything, I think the timing was kind of surprising to me. I mean, they didn't do it before the start of free agency. They did it, a few days into free agency. But it didn't make a ton of sense to me. Yeah. And to hear David Andrews come out, he released a podcast just the other day. And it's pretty clear he at least wanted to try. He wanted to go into training camp. He wanted to try to, recover from this shoulder injury and, try to play again. And just the fact that he was pretty open in saying that, it kind of confirms to me, the surprise when it comes to it. And I was listening to, it was NBC Sports Boston, Tommy Curran's, his podcast the other day, and he was talking about it, and he had Devin McCourty on. I thought Devin McCourty brought up a great point about why would you do this to a player who has so much, knowledge of Josh McDaniels' offense, and how much, having someone like David Andrews would help, Drake May, in another new offense. And so I think that was a great point as well. And it kind of does make me question, what led to it at this point, and, the timing of things.
Yeah, well, that podcast you mentioned is a Quick Snap podcast. Here's a sound on David Andrews' thoughts of, getting released.
You respect that as a player. Obviously I thought there were some things I could do to help and provide value and but I understand their decision at some level, Yeah,
you have to respect it, but you don't always have to like it.
No, that's the truth. Like, if you're a competitor,
and that's the hardest part.
If you're a competitor, you're not like great, like this is all like, no one wants to get fired even in the real world. Like, and
that's right.
But yeah, I definitely respect their decision. Do I like it? No. I mean, I think, like I said, I think I could provide value, and I was, hoping that I could try to play, and like I said, just trying to get the ship in the right direction and, help the organization and the community and whatever you want to say.
Okay, so no surprise there, right? David Andrews, consummate professional, takes a high road, says everything right. But that release leads to the signing of former Viking center Garrett Bradbury. I have not talked to you since this signing. You know, I'm not the biggest offensive line fan ever, but my God, do they need help. So when this news hit, I accepted it with open arms. I didn't give a damn who it was. I even saw a lot of Vikings fans trolling. Like, yeah, good luck with that guy. But look, he's a former first-round pick from the Vikings. We know how this stuff goes, Esmizzle. We've covered these football teams long enough. Sometimes if you're a first-rounder and you come in with these crazy expectations, and maybe, like, the kid's not bad, so it's not like he's a scrub player, but maybe he didn't live up to expectations there in Minnesota. But you know what? Who gives a damn? Because the way this offensive line is, I don't see any world in which Bradbury can't help you, at least, Esmizzle.
Yeah, and I think the Patriots, it's almost like they deserve a round of applause at this point. That, they did go out, they added a veteran, so now they don't enter the draft with as glaring of a need as they would have. So I agree with you. I think there is something to be said about that. I don't know if the Patriots are in a better spot right now with Garrett Bradbury and not David Andrews. I would still believe that, David Andrews gives you a better chance, especially when healthy. So I don't know if they're in a better spot, replacing one for the other, but after the release of Andrews, they're certainly better, adding Bradbury. And now, he's in a room. We'll see what Cole Strange has in there. We'll see what Ben Brown. I mean, Ben Brown was playing a ton last year, but he was, off the streets practically. They signed him off a practice squad, and good for him for kind of carving out a role, but it's certainly not he's not the answer. He's not the long-term solution at the position. And I just think, kind of back to my initial point, now you go into the draft and maybe you don't have to reach on someone like, Jared Wilson. I know he's the Georgia center that I would assume is probably one of the first ones off the board, whether that's day 2 or early day 3. And now you don't have to reach for him. Now you can let the board kind of fall to you a little bit because you do have a veteran at, short-term deal, not a long-term solution, but at the very least you have an answer to that position if needed.
Check out Nesson's Daily Sports Podcast. Boston has entered the chat. Of course, we are talking all about this historic sale of the Boston Celtics. Boston has entered the chat, can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else you get your podcast. All right, now we started 7 days ago. Let's go to present day for the latest episode of As the Patriots World Turns. How about this? At the time, you like that? At the time of
I like that one.
The taping of this podcast, Stefon Diggs has had dinner. He's met with everyone. There's a pending physical that he took. Like this Stefon Diggs to the Patriots thing feels real. So let's talk about impact here. Like, you and I threw around all these names all off season. DK Metcalf, T. Higgins, Chris Godwin, all these. Well, strikeout, right? We even talked about Debo or trading for A.J. Brown or Ayuk. I mean, right now it doesn't feel like any of that's going to happen. So you look up. I don't remember once us ever talking about Stefon Diggs as a possibility. And if we did, I'm sure we poo-pooed it so fast. Like, that ain't it. Yet here we are. I mean, I guess, like, if this thing happens, Esmizzle, between now and the next time we talk, what does it mean? What does this stage of Stefon Diggs, what does he bring to the table? Does he bring anything? I'm going to be honest with you, brother. I think this move, because of some of those names that I mentioned, this move reeks of desperation to me. It's like, every other option we had on the table's gone. So let's kick the tires on Stefon Diggs. Why didn't you have that approach with Cam Robinson too, when you lost Stanley, right? Like, I'm confused. I think I'm more confused by the Stefon Diggs news than I am anything.
I think that's definitely fair. I mean, it's. So to your point about all the receivers, I don't think we did really give Stefon Diggs a ton of time. And that's because, he wasn't plan A, he wasn't plan B. He's probably closer to plan C at this point.
Right.
But with that said, I think, if you temper those expectations, which, I will, I think we all will at this point, Stefon Diggs entering age 32 and, coming off an injury. So I think if you temper those expectations, you can still, see why it would be a move that they should make, right? I mean, I think that they should make it. And because, again, if you temper the expectations, it's just when he's healthy, he's really, really good. And your receiver room right now is pretty bad. And so it's a little bit, I don't want to call it a dart throw, but, you're kind of hoping that, he gets healthy and all that sort of thing. To your other point about it's also fair, I think, to see it as a contradiction to some sorts. I mean, there was a report just the other day that the Patriots were wary of going after DK Metcalf because of, essentially they were worried about how Drake May would react to someone like DK Metcalf and if he was, calling for the ball all the time. And you get to a player like Stefon Diggs, who's known, at least in the past, to do similar things. I mean, he more or less shot his way out of Minnesota, shot his way out of Buffalo because of those things. We'll see if he's certainly in a different time of his career. So I'm sure those are questions that, Mike Vrabel and all those guys are talking to him kind of behind the scenes, like, would you be able to fit in our situation and that sort of thing. And I think if the answer to that is yes, if Stefon Diggs comes in here or would come in here and he's willing to kind of take on a different role and, maybe help the receiver room, he's a veteran in the receiver room. If he's able to do that stuff, I certainly understand why the Patriots would want to make that move.
Yeah, I guess. Again, kind of going back to what you were saying about the reports, they don't want a diva. For everything you just said, right? Everything you just laid out, I actually think he can do the same thing in Houston. Like, to me, and I understand the business. Look, the business side of this is really the elephant in the room, right? The dollars and cents. But if I'm Stefon Diggs, if I'm picking up what you're putting down, Esmizzle, if I'm Stefon Diggs, and at this, it sounds like what you're saying, at this stage of his career, that this is your brand. This is your market. Come in, be a veteran guy, help the young guys, whatever. Okay, I can do that in Houston on a team that is right there. Like, when some of these players start saying, well, I want to play for a real contender, Houston is a contender. So that excuse goes out of the window as it pertains to the Texans. Then I look around. They have some injury issues at that position as well with younger guys. So all of you are working your way back. You could still help mold a Nico Collins and all these young dudes that they have already who are absolute studs. So, I mean, and obviously you have C.J. Stroud, who's more established than a Drake May. They're closer to a playoff team than the Patriots. They are a playoff team, for God's sakes. I look at the Patriots, even for everything you said of what Diggs brings, I don't think it's the right fit. One of the reasons he has a diva reputation is because things started to go left in Buffalo. They couldn't beat the Chiefs. Let's call it what it is. They started to lose more games, even though they were still a playoff team. His role was diminishing a little bit. He was barking at Josh Allen, who is a freak of nature and one of the best quarterbacks in this game. Then he goes to Houston, and he does get hurt. To be fair, I thought he was playing well with Houston in the role that you just described. But I don't necessarily think at this stage it's the right fit for the Patriots. Mm-hmm. Forget Diggs. For the Patriots, why would you bring this guy in? I don't know if I want my younger receivers learning from him. I think it's a better fit for him to recover in Houston and bring that veteran presence and leadership to that team. Is that fair?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I do think, and it's been reported just over the last 24 hours or whatever, that the Patriots are his first, visit. So if that's the case, I mean, we might think that he's a better fit for Houston, but Houston might say, well, we don't need him anymore. We got Nico Collins, and, we have younger guys coming up. John Mechie, another one who, another younger guy. So they might view their receiver room, arguably one of the deepest in the league, and say, we don't need a guy that's entering his 32 season and he's coming off an injury. So I just feel like, based on kind of the, what we're a week into free agency at this point, over a week into free agency, and there hasn't been a ton of, fish biting on Stefon Diggs' line, right? It's just, it's clear. And the Patriots, it seems like, are the first one. And I just think it's, with where the Patriots are at, I think it is probably time to start taking some chances. And, you have a veteran receiver, you sign him to a short-term kind of a prove-it deal who, maybe that's 1 year, maybe that's 2 years, and you have him on the second year of the contract. That way, when he is fully healthy, after a year, he is fully healthy again. And I do think I could see that making sense. And it would alleviate some of the concern when it comes to, it's certainly not taking the concern away and saying don't go after other receivers or don't draft a top receiver in the draft. It's definitely not any of that. It's adding to the receiver room, and you're adding a talent that, when healthy, is far and away better than anyone you have in the room right now.
NBC Sports Boston's Phil Perry had some input on the possibility of the Patriots signing Stefon Diggs and worries about him that I have being an issue in the locker room. I want you to check this out, S. Mizzle. So given his age, injury history, and a salary that'll be benefiting someone in his situation, Diggs' expectations would have to be managed to agree. This is sort of what you were alluding to, Esmeezy.
Yep.
They were last year in Houston, where he's a model citizen, according to one Texan staffer. Quote, he got along with people well here. Everyone liked him. He was a good teammate and worked hard. No noticeable issues. He understood Nico Collins was the guy. Further in this article, he goes on to say, if Diggs were to sign, his acquisition would not prevent the Patriots from continuing to look for more high-end help there. You alluded to that as well, Esmeezy. For instance, if the Patriots were in a position to draft dual-threat Heisman Trophy winner Travis Hunter at number 4 overall, having Diggs as a savvy route-running number 2 option could be beneficial to Hunter as he picks up the finer points of the position after splitting his time on offense and defense in college. The Patriots would likely already have good intel on what kind of teammate and worker they'll get in Diggs because, here's a tie-in, offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels' brother, Ben McDaniels, was Diggs' receivers coach in Houston. So odds are Diggs wouldn't be visiting in the first place if the Patriots felt it wasn't their kind of person, obviously fitting into the offensive system as well that Josh McDaniels runs. I tell you, what stands out to me from those quotes is really the Travis Hunter thing. If I just say this out loud, Stefon Diggs is the only real name that the Patriots acquired in the offseason at the wide receiver position, him and Mac Hollins, right? Then that's a failure in my book. If you tell me Stefon Diggs is a complementary piece to Travis Hunter at the wide receiver position, I can get behind it a little bit more. I still don't think it's great, but it is an upgrade for sure over what you had last season and seasons past. I do not believe just signing Stefon Diggs right now at this age, coming off this injury, and you have to wait for him to get healthy. I'm sorry. I don't believe it's an upgrade. It's not a downgrade. You're not going backwards, but it's a lateral move.
Yeah.
If it's Diggs and Hunter, I think you could be cooking with something here. Do you?
Yeah, and I just think it's got to, again, we need to drive home the point that if they sign Stefon Diggs, it's going to be on a short-term deal. It's going to be on a prove-it deal sort of thing. And that's not going to take them out of signing others or, drafting others. I think that is, that's important because it's not, the need is so clear that someone might think, adding Stefon Diggs fills a need, and it does not.
No.
I completely agree with you, but you are bringing in a player that, when healthy, is better than anyone in the room, and that's the reality of the situation. The Patriots have put themselves in this situation, and that's kind of why I do go back to I think it maybe is. We want to temper our expectations again. But it is, it's time to maybe take a swing or two. And I think Stefon Diggs, he's well worth a swing.
Yeah, one thing about him too, we're talking about attitude and injuries and all that. But you just said it, and you're absolutely right. When healthy, when he's right, you can't question him, the receiver. Now, obviously,
definitely not.
I think everyone can agree, Father Time's undefeated, except for Tom Brady, but he's not the same prime Stefon Diggs that he once was.
Yep.
But dude is tough as nails. He goes across the middle. I mean, now I know Houston's in a dome, but I saw him for years in Buffalo in snowstorms, ice storms, windstorms. North Pole conditions, make play after play, big catch after big catch moving chain after moving chain of possessions. So it's not like I'm knocking him, the player, even at this advanced stage. I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze sometimes. When guys are in their prime, like Buffalo, I'm sure, ate a lot of shack for years from Stefon Diggs because he was in his prime. He's putting up numbers. He was cooking.
Yep.
Like a lot of times, it's especially at that position of wide receiver, you'll put up with a whole lot of. We've seen teams put up with a whole lot of different personalities and attitudes, but it's because the production matches it or exceeds it. In this case, now at this stage, he has to be. I would think he has to be self-aware enough to know I can't come in here with the same riffraff. I just can't do it. I got to get in and fit in. I got to get with the program. I'm here to help these young receivers, and I'm here to help this young quarterback grow. There should be a certain gravitas, a certain respect for a Mike Vrabel, a certain respect and held in high regard for a Josh McDaniels, especially that tie. So I hear you. I think what's happening with me is because of all these names we've missed out on, it just feels like settling. And I'd almost rather – I'd rather just add to the youth movement. I'd just rather add a couple receivers in the draft and put them all in there with the pups. Because of Chris Godwin, I would understand a veteran guy, won a Super Bowl, never been a pain in the arse. I want that guy developing my young receivers. Stefon Diggs has always been about himself. And that would worry me, putting him around these players. But business is business. Finance is finance. If you can get him for pennies on the dollar at this stage of his career and bring him in, it's one of those low-risk, high-reward things. The only thing I would say, Smeezy, I think it is high risk. Because if he gets around a Jalen Polk and Javon Baker and they start feeding into this, I'm like Stefon Diggs. No, you ain't. No, you're not. Or he starts – yapping and barking at Drake May like he was Josh Allen, of all people. I'm turned off by that, Smeezy. I am.
I think some of those, I think you might be doing a year too late. I mean, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker without Stefon Diggs in the room last year, I think came across sometimes like they were already Stefon Diggs. So,
right.
No, I think your point is valid. And I think it's turning like, if Mike Vrabel and them, and the Patriots can kind of have a conversation like, we don't mind you being a competitor and like wanting to win. We don't mind that. We don't mind that aspect of you, but you can't be calling out our rookie or our second-year quarterback because he didn't get you the ball on, 3rd and 17. Like, I think like there's a kind of a decent argument to be made or a decent conversation to be made that, if you can do this, if you can channel your energy into competitiveness, we're good with it. But if you're channeling it into, calling people out and that sort of thing, then we're out. And Stefon Diggs was having another, on pace for another 1,000-yard season last year. So I also think it is like worth mentioning that before the injury, it's Father Time is undefeated, but it wasn't. He was, I guess, stunted last year because of the injury. It wasn't because of his age, sort of thing. Right. Is maybe the point that I'm trying to make. So
he was playing before he got hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And now we'll see what happens next year. We'll see what happens in 2025. Obviously, it sounds like he could miss some time in training camp. Maybe he's ready at the start of the season. And maybe even if he is ready at the start of the season, he's really not himself until week 8 or 10 or something like that. So that that all comes into the consideration, I think, especially when you're giving the contract that you're giving. But again, I'm just going to come back to I think he is at this point in time with the position the Patriots are in. I think he is worth a 1 or 2 year deal at whatever, 10 million, 12 million bucks.
All right. Well, again, just to reiterate, at the time of the taping of this podcast, he is not signed, sealed, and delivered, although it feels like it could be inevitable here. So I'll end it here. Let's go Prediction City. I told you, I think the best fit for him is for sure to humble yourself, but I think it's to humble yourself, take less money, because that's going to happen anyways. You're not going to make what you were making at your peak. I think it's go back to Houston. I think that's the best move for him. That's what my gut says. What do you say? Do you think he's a Patriot? Where do you think this ends up?
Given that we haven't heard anything about him, having visits with other teams and having meetings with other teams, and given the fact that it came out, since his meeting with the Patriots that he hasn't had those meetings, I think right now the Patriots are in a pretty good spot. I think that they could land him. I think that they should land him. It sounds like they had some good dinners down at one Patriot place last night. So, maybe don't let him leave. Don't let him leave the restaurant the next time.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you got to get that physical. That's a key. Like you got to pass this physical, man. There's some medical issues here that we have to check out first. What a 7 days.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, right. What a 7 days for the Patriots, man. I mean, honestly, it is a roller coaster ride. And just think of this. The draft is next. Speaking of which, our Sean McGuire has some insight that only you can get here on Foxborough Rush, taking us behind the curtain, if you will, on some potential Patriots prospects. That in 30 seconds. But first, stream the entire Red Sox season with a NESN 360 annual plan. It's available at an all-new, reduced price of just $20 a month, paid annually. And get this, for a limited time, you get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit NESN360.com to sign up today. All right, Sean McGuire, you heard that fantastic tease I gave you.
Yeah, that was quite the tease, yeah.
I mean, I guess you caught up with a coach who coached potentially a couple of Patriots draft picks here. We'll see. We know their prospects. Tell us all about it.
Yep. Yeah, so I interviewed Missouri head football coach Eli Drinkwitz, which I just want to stop and kind of stop there. That's got to be on the all name team. I don't know if there's a coach's all name team, but Eli Drinkwitz certainly has to be on it.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so I talked with him about Armand Membou as well as Luther Burden. Both of them are probably first round picks. Membou is definitely in consideration for the Patriots at number 4. A lot of these draft experts have him as a top tackle in the class, especially after he lit the world on fire during the NFL Scouting Combine. So it was really great to talk to Drinkwitz about him. And I think, and I'll kind of just, before we get into anything else, I think the biggest takeaway that I had and the biggest question that I had for Coach was, do you think he could transition from playing right tackle to playing left tackle? Because that's, from a Patriots perspective, that's what they need. And Membou played strictly right tackle when he was at Missouri. And the coach said, he is confident that he could. And it comes down to, power and athleticism. He said those were his Membou's 2 biggest strengths. And he said, pretty much he thinks he could play anywhere. He could play guard, he could play either tackle position, and called him a rare specimen. So I thought that was, really, really great insight.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of these guys on the offensive line in particular coming out of college are moved around a ton of times, and they have to. You almost have to have that sort of versatility, and then you get to the NFL. The NFL can only take what the college game gives them, and I think sometimes people get confused with that. But like the college game is a feeder to the league, so this is what happens. So they come into the league, and maybe every now and again you get a true left tackle all world, but for the most part, most of these guys are interchangeable. And in the NFL, you kind of have to be based on injuries, free agency, trades, all the drama that you and I get paid to talk about. So I'm not against that. I guess my question to you with talking to this coach, a lot of these guys are called by these coaches. And if Vrabel is to pick up the phone and say, why should we draft this kid, what would the pitch be?
Yeah, I more or less asked that exact question, and he just said, his belief in Armand is based on his his ability that he thinks he is so far away from his ceiling, and just the fact that you got a 20-year-old offensive tackle coming in here that's going to continue to grow and get better, and his best football is still ahead of him, and with that, he's proven that he's still an elite player in college football. But just that room to grow is really what stuck out. And I'll just kind of read you a direct quote. My belief would be if you're the Patriots drafting at the number 4 spot, you want a player who is not only elite but has room to grow. That's when you draft Hall of Famers. You don't want guys that are tapped out. He clearly has plenty left inside. So that's a quote from the coach right there. And I also will say, like, he was cross-trained at left tackle, and Coach Drinkwitz kind of confirmed that, said that they cross-trained all those guys. And when I did kind of say, all right, well, why was he staying at right tackle instead of playing left tackle? Understandable explanation. They had a guy, it's essentially where the team needed him, is what coach said. And they had a guy, Javon Foster, he was a Jaguars 4th-round pick last year. He was a left tackle when Membou started at Missouri. And then when Foster left, Missouri went into the transfer portal, signed who they thought was the best player available. His name is Marcus Bryant. Marcus Bryant was an all-ACC or an all-AAC first-teamer, and he only played left tackle at SMU. So it essentially just it was much more Membou doing what was best for the team and, that sort of thing, as opposed to him not being available or being good enough, to play left tackle.
Now, let's talk about wide receivers here, because Luther Burden III is another player who played at Missouri. And I'm going to tell you something. True story. And I said on Foxborough Rush, you could check the tape. But I told George during the college football season, we were sort of scouting and looking at wide receivers because we know that's an area of need. We knew that way back when. And I told him I liked a kid in Mizzou named Luther Burden III. And he rolled his eyes at me. He's like, he's too small. I'm like, okay, I get it. He's not built like Megatron, but those don't exactly grow on trees. The reason I wanted him is because watching him both in his sophomore and his junior year, dude is just a playmaker. I mean, he can make every play. They really use him a lot like Debo. I saw him, obviously catch slants and go to the house. Bubble screens, go to the house. Reverses, jet sweeps, you name it. They were trying to get him the ball. I saw him returning kicks and punts. This kid is a playmaker no matter where you put him on the field. I mentioned his size, 5'11", 208. So, he's not the biggest cat you've ever seen. His sophomore year, he really jumped out to me, 1,200 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. Junior year, not as good, but he is a playmaker, and they were a mess in terms of their offense anyway. I can't blame all that on him. And even when I watch Missouri, because it all goes back to betting for me, Measy. I bet on Mizzou a few times this year. The kid was making plays all over the place. What did Coach say about Luther Burden III?
Yeah, and I'll kind of break this into 2 different parts, because the first part that really stuck out to me was more so like a big picture thing, and then there was also the obvious football traits. But from a big picture standpoint, I really was kind of surprised or, a little bit with how Coach Drinkwitz really just praised and appreciated how Luther Burden, during the recruitment process, and how Luther Burden essentially had 39 offers. Every college football program in the country wanted him. He was the number 1 wide receiver in the country. He was a 5-star recruit. Everybody wanted him. And, Luther Burden comes in and he's like, well, I want to make a name for myself. I want to, build a legacy in state. And so Drinkwitz really pointed that out and just said, going from essentially having any offer that he wanted and kind of staying at home and doing that really spoke a lot about Burden. And one quote I have right here is, he's absolutely responsible for helping us build this program around and bring in some national recognition into our school and into our football program. He also talked about his willingness to believe in the vision when nobody else would, and, quote, we owe him a big debt of gratitude. So those were some of the big picture things. And moving into the football side, he just praised how good he is with the ball in his hands. Said he was a mismatch and a tough tackle for corners. He actually, I know George is talking about he doesn't have the size. Coach Drinkwitz thought, his size at 6 foot and 206 pounds, really makes him that mismatch. And he kind of said the same thing that you just alluded to. You can get him the ball in just so many different ways, whether it's out of the backfield, whether it's, jet sweeps and quick slants and all that sort of stuff. Because he is such a mismatch to corners, he really, he can get plenty of yards on the ground.
You mentioned how you had a first-round grade on Membou. I wonder with Burden, Where do you sort of see him, just in your opinion, where do you sort of see him getting drafted in terms of where in the draft? Like what round grade do you have on Burden? Because I like his game, but he's obviously not going to be a top pick.
Yeah, I think when you're talking specifically from a Patriots perspective, I think that is where it gets a little curious, I guess, because he's probably too rich at number 4. He is too rich at number 4. But he's most likely not going to be there at 38. So you got these 2 third-rounders. You got an early second-round pick. He might be one of those players. If you go tackle, maybe you go Membou at number 4 or Will Campbell at number 4, and then Burden kind of slips to late teens, early 20s, and the Patriots come back up and get him at early 20s, and they give up their second-round pick, they give up a third-rounder, and they walk away with 2 first-rounders. That being offensive tackle and wide receiver, their 2 biggest needs. So I think, that is definitely the question of, where he fits for the Patriots in specifically in regards to the draft board. And I think it would be something like that. He's probably a player that's not going to be there at 38. So if you do like him, you're probably going to have to trade up back into the first round or at least early second round.
I'm almost thinking in tiers here where, Ted McMillan, we just watched his pro day, ran a 4.4 or 4.5, depending on who clocked it. But regardless, he's fast. And people thought maybe that would be the knock on him. So I unless you're taking him at 4 or trading back to within that top 10, I'm kind of taking him off the board. But at least I'm putting him at that highest tier in terms of what the Patriots could draft at wide receiver. Then it's that next tier where George drives me nuts. He's been talking about this Jaden Higgins kid since forever. Yeah. But one of the reasons why is because of the size. George wants a big body Benz. He wants somebody who can, in the red zone, go up and get it. We know Tech can do that, and we believe Jaden Higgins can do it. But then, listen, I think Luther Burden's in that same tier as Higgins. Do you value him more? Do you think because again, I think George and other Patriots fans get caught up in prototype, and I understand who doesn't want a 6'4" wide receiver who runs like who doesn't want Justin Jefferson? Who doesn't want that? But I do think there's space for a playmaker on an offense that doesn't have one other than your quarterback. I look at Burden, and I get Higgins' size, but I look at Burden as someone who I can plug and play and put him all over the field, and he's making plays. He's almost – is it fair to call him a better version of Pop Douglas? Because I kind of think he could be. Am I insane for that? Am I insane to put Burden and Higgins – in the same category in terms of prospect?
Well, to your Pop Douglas point, I mean, if you're going to be drafting him in the first round, early second round, he better be better than Pop Douglas. I think that's probably where you got to start with that. I think that, and I know you mentioned Jaden Higgins, I would say that he's probably that Burden is above Jaden Higgins and those guys. I think of Burden as more of a, late first round, mid to late first rounder. And, that's with the Texas kid, Matthew Golden, the Texas receiver. Yeah. And there's a few others. Ted McMillan is a little bit above those guys. But there's a handful of, mid to late first rounders. And then I think you get to the Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel and a lot of those other guys on day 2. So if you're kind of ranking in that case, I would say that Burden is above those guys. And that's why I think that, I think the Patriots might be able to get a Jaden Higgins at 38 or a Jalen Noel at 38. I don't think that they're going to be able to get, Luther Burden at 38.
Okay, so gut feel, out of these 2 guys you profiled, sounds like you wouldn't be shocked that one of them's a Patriot. It doesn't feel like you think both will be. And would you be shocked if neither? If you're, it's betting for me. If you're betting, you think we get 1 for 2 here, 2 for 2, or over?
I think so. The more likely player to be drafted by the Patriots has to be Armand Membou. Okay. I think the Patriots are more likely, if Travis Hunter isn't there, if Abdul Carter isn't there, I think it's more or less a no-brainer to go offensive tackle.
Okay.
And I think at that point you have a 50-50 shot. It's either Membou or it's Will Campbell. So I think the more likely Patriot is going to be Armand Membou. I think that there's a chance the Patriots somehow, do trade up and, like Luther Burden or something like that. And you get him again, mid to late first round. I would say somewhere between like 25 and 33, call it. And, they trade up into one of those spots and get a player like Luther Burden. If you're going to ask me if I think I'm going 500 or batting 1,000, I'm going to say I believe I'm going to go 500, and I think they're going to draft Membou.
Okay. I can live with that. 1 out of 2 ain't bad, my friend. All right, so listen, those are just the Missouri boys in terms of their Patriots draft perspective. I mean, I think it's a good time to do a mock draft across the board. We'll do that in 30 seconds. If you're enjoying the show, you can catch new episodes of Foxborough Rush every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You can hear from NFL draft experts like ESPN's Matt Miller and NFLs.com Eric Edholm and PFF's Trevor Sikkema, and all about the latest news surrounding the Patriots. Foxborough Rush is available on Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Twitch, YouTube, and wherever else you get your podcast. Okay, so I teased a mock draft there, but I don't want us to go crazy because we ain't got that much time left in the show. But I do want to get a reaction here because Patriots.com content producer Mike DeSalt did a mock draft, and I want you to take a look at this, Esmeezy, because you're the mock drafter out of the two of us here. But I think this Mike DeSalt guy and I should be friends because check this out. How about Ashton Jeanty, baby, from Boise State? I mean, this guy thinks like I do. Ashton Jeanty is a first-round pick. I mean, I got to get your thoughts on this. He went Israel later. How about Isaiah Bond in the 4th round? I don't know how realistic that is, but I don't give a damn. Ashton Jeanty, round 1. That's what I'm talking about, Esmeezy. So are you going to call this guy crazy like you call me crazy for putting Jeanty with the Patriots?
I don't think the Patriots should draft Ashton Jeanty at number 4.
I did all that setup for you to just shoot me down, bro.
Yeah. I do not think that they should do that.
Right.
I think they should go offensive tackle. I'll say that again.
Okay. All right. Well, as I've said before,
I will say to that point, to that offensive tackle point, I was surprised to see them end up with, in this mock draft, them end up with the Minnesota offensive tackle at number 69. That would be, I think, pretty good value. And then I know you kind of said this as well, but to see Isaiah Bond drop to the 4th round, I'm not exactly sure if to think that he won't be a top 100 pick. I think that's probably a little bit of a stretch.
I would agree with that. And listen, I've been telling you, I don't think Jeanty. Now at 4, I get it. But I don't think trading back. Let's just, for the sake of this conversation, let's say Carter and Hunter are off the board. And you're like, okay, I'm going to trade back and try to get a Will Campbell. Will Campbell could be that's a risk you're taking if you don't take him at 4. If you're like, it's a little too rich to take Campbell, we're not sure if he's really a tackle. He's probably more of a guard. We don't want to give up for that. We know the arm length and all that nonsense, okay? So let's trade back, I don't know, I'm just making this up, to 10 or 9. And we'll try to get Campbell there and acquire more draft assets. Well, let's say someone takes Campbell off the board before your pick. I don't think it is crazy at all. Instead of going next best tackle available, which would be a reach then too, I think you take Jeanty there and you continue to harp in on the offensive line late in the draft. Okay, so you're getting multiple offensive linemen in this draft, and you're hoping, you're throwing a bunch of against the wall and hoping that it sticks. A couple of these kids can play. But I think taking Jeanty's not insane, because if you can get him and a couple more bodies on the offensive line in this draft, that adds a whole new wrinkle to your offense that you don't have. This is what I've been trying to say from the beginning. When you do lose out on some of these names we talked about, a T. Higgins, a DK Metcalf, I mean, all these playmakers on the outside, when you lose out on them, there are other ways to attack an anemic offense. And one of the fastest ways, I actually would argue it's faster to go ahead and upgrade and get dynamic in your run game. The most fun offensive linemen have are running people over violently in the run game. It is not pass pro. Now, you get paid based on pass pro, how good you're at it. Your technique is more important on pass pro and how good you're at it. But to run the football and line up across from another big fat guy like you and move him out of the way so this stud, Ashton Jeanty, can hit the hole and go to pay dirt, you can do that overnight, baby. That's all I'm saying. We talk about so much about the development of Drake May, which I'm all for, but we all do it the same way. We're like, you got to fix the line. Okay, I agree. And you got to get him a number one wide receiver. I don't disagree, but I think there's other ways to do it. Now, Jalen Hurts is not the pocket passer that Drake May is. I understand that. But Jalen Hurts with a dynamic run game, I mean, they won a Super Bowl. So I just think there's other ways to do this. Now, Hurts, I get, has weapons too. They have everything. It's an embarrassment of riches there in Philly. New England doesn't have that. But if you can get an Ashton Jeanty and a young, opportunistic, physical offensive line with Rabel's mentality and this defense that they are putting together as we speak, which is legit, I think your offense can be more dynamic and better, and it didn't cost you a ton.
I commend you for
you hate it. You hate
it for fighting this fight.
You hate it.
I started smiling when you said the thing about Philly because I'm just thinking, well, Jalen Hurts is so good in Philly because they have the best offensive line in football, probably.
They do.
So I think it has a lot more to do with that than it does Saquon Barkley just came over and had an unbelievable year.
Yeah.
But I think it has a lot more to do with the offensive line. So my question back to you just during this mock draft exercise. So you said go back to 9 or 10, Campbell's off the board.
Yeah.
Is Membou off the board?
Well, let me ask you this. Is his grade higher than a Banks? Like, that's what I mean. You're still playing the game of who do you have graded higher, and it still feels like a reach. I don't have an issue with Will Campbell, the player. I have an issue with Will Campbell at number 4. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the next, whoever you have on your big board behind Campbell, it would still arguably, debatably, be a reach at 9 or 10. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think if Membou was on the board at that point, I don't think that's a reach.
Okay.
I think a lot of, especially since like the scouting combine, when I think I mentioned this earlier, he just went berserk and just his numbers and measurables and traits that were just off the charts. I think since that time, he has risen up the draft boards, so skyrocketed up the boards to the point that it's very likely that he's going to be a top 10 pick. And I just think if you can add a player who's worthy of a top 10 pick at a position of need, again, and at this point we're talking if the Patriots traded back and are at 8, 9, or 10, and you can add a player like that, I think you have to do it as opposed to drafting a running back who might be one of the best prospects in the draft, might be one of the best talents in the draft, but just given the difference in need and the position, how the position is treated, I think you would have to go with the tackle.
So right now, you would have who? You would have Campbell, Membou, and then Banks right now?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah,
wow.
That's how I would, yeah.
Okay.
I just think so much of it has come since the scouting combine, and you read the experts, listen to experts, and all those guys now really have Campbell and Membou kind of fighting over, 1A, 1B when it comes to the offensive tackle. So I think the measurables kind of lean more towards Membou. We've talked at length about Will Campbell's arm, so we don't need to do that anymore. But I think that, all those things combined have kind of helped Membou kind of be right there when it comes to Will Campbell.
Okay, then stay right here for a second. Stay with me. Because I learn offensive line
not
from
going
you because
anywhere.
I could care less about this stuff. I learn offensive line from you guys. Are we talking about you and I are in this because we're mock drafting here? We're in this trade back scenario. Do you see a world in which Membou goes 4 and not Will Campbell? Is that possible?
You mean to the Patriots?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think that is possible for sure. I think that if they go offensive tackle and if they want to, fill their biggest need, I think it's more or less a 50-50 shot at this point. And, as we get closer to the draft, we'll kind of see. But, a lot of these experts have Membou going. I think it was Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper. They both had Membou going over Will Campbell at this point.
Wow. Well, there we go. I mean, listen, draft night's going to be so much fun. Whether it's Campbell, Membou, either way, I'm going to be disappointed if they don't say Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. And I'm damn sure going to be disappointed if they don't say Ashton Genty. Because you're right. This is the hill I will stand and fight on, my friend. I am consistent, Sean McGuire. We appreciate you always,
my camera
man.
isn't right now, so
it's all right. Hey, we have you. That's all that matters. For Sean McGuire and Travis Thomas, and we thank all of you for coming inside the Foxborough Rush. Till next time, when we rush it again, baby. Peace.